You know, I pulled out the chair to fix this light and forgot. Don't need no work order. Just